Welcome to the Nipple Chronicles, the podcast where we dive headfirst into the raw and real experiences of women today. I'm your host, Jessica, and I'm here to challenge the norms, stir the pot, and celebrate the individuality of women, while confronting unhealthy societal norms and, most importantly, honoring our authentic selves. So buckle up and get ready to laugh, learn, and maybe even unlearn some of the things you thought you knew about being a woman today. Welcome to episode 12 of the Nipple Chronicles. This is kicking off season 2, and I'm here today with the lovely Rosalind, a dear friend who I've known for 6 years, who is just such a pivotal person in my life. She's been such a great influence, and I'm so excited to talk to her today about her journey in motherhood and how she's navigated her career while simultaneously being a young single mother. So welcome, Rosalind.
Thank you.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, Rosalind Celia Staley, full name. And yes, it is Shakespearean. We talked about that a little earlier. I am 48 years young. I'm a single mother of 2, 26-year-old who is married to a lovely bride, Jade, and my daughter, Maddie, who's 24, who lives with me. She's going to school and working, and my son is he is a body tech at a automobile shop, and he manages it.
Okay. And are you currently single, dating, married?
Definitely single. I've been a single mom pretty much the whole time I was raising my kids. I had, one serious relationship after my divorce. And then when that kind of fizzled out and didn't work, my ex-husband had enough relationships for all of us. And so I really chose to kind of do this on my own and kind of put that on the back seat so that I was present and there for my kids.
Wow. Kids, if you're listening, this is the sacrifices that Mommy Rosalind made for you. So taking us back to your early 20s, what was it like navigating motherhood at a very young age?
Navigating is like such a big word because I feel like I was just trial by fire. At 20, you're growing up together, which is something that, most parents do, no matter how old you are. But, when you're 20 years old, you have not even learned how to make a decision for yourself, let alone make a decision for the survival of 2 human beings and to grow them into adult humans that are kind and loving and successful and, are being just good people in this world. And I was just figuring out how to be that person for myself.
Yeah. No, I can't even imagine. We were talking about this a little during our pre-interview that, even now. So for those of you who have listened, I actually did turn 40 during the course of the last 12 episodes. But for even now looking at myself as like a 40-year-old woman, I'm like, even kids now scare me. So like super kudos to you because I don't even know what that would look like now. And maybe it's kind of the double-edged sword. Like, do you have kids young or do you have kids older? But I feel like even now, like dating and marriage feels like almost unnecessary. So kids aren't even anywhere on my radar. We were talking about this earlier too, and we'll get into this a little bit more in the episode, but just how you start kind of looking at what is the value? I mean, yes, mothers and parents, I know there's something for you in having kids, but for me, it's well, what is the value now? If I do have kids, can that same legacy or companionship or love or whatever it is that why parents choose to be parents, can I find that somewhere else? So again, we'll get back into that because now obviously you're at a very different space. But, we were talking about this. So the next question I have for you is how did motherhood change, your perspective about your career and just your ambition?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, when you're young at 20, when I had kids, I wouldn't even say I was ambitious. I was just like jumping off into life and just, thinking about like, ooh, what is even ambition? And throughout raising them, I became ambitious. And ambition is something that for a single mom who starts off making, I made $8 an hour when I became a single parent. Like I just had to figure it out. And there's a lot of places and people out there that will support you, especially if you have ambition and you want to, break free from WIC or from food stamps or, from all the things that are there to support you. If you want to break free from that, it's about drive. It's about, my ambition was wanting to not look at my checking account before I went to the grocery store. Mm-hmm. Like I wanted to be able to go into the grocery store and not be counting pennies at the end. But as that grew, then I wanted to buy a house and then I wanted to own a new car. And so it was just these stepping stones of things that I wanted to make my life more comfortable. But I've always had inside me just this, ooh, what's next?
Yeah, like a drive for something.
Want to do something more. And, I ended up falling into my career. It wasn't something that I chose. When I decided to choose it, I'd been doing it for 15 years. When I chose it, I was like, this is it. My pay went up by $100,000 a year. And I put all of what I learned as a parent, learned being scrappy and working with little to be the person, the executive assistant, the leader that I am today.
Yeah, no, there's a lot there in like what you just shared doing it. And it's so powerful, especially for young mothers that are listening that are currently navigating what you're describing. And I mean, even some of what you just said, like it still hits me. Like I obviously like we've known each other for a while now and I've had different like careers and I was on a path and it didn't feel right. Like it and I do see the difference though in like when I did choose that back like 3 years ago, there was a big shift and I did make a lot more money. It just didn't feel right for me. So no, and I acknowledge you for like really taking that on because there will be plenty of people that like will squander away their years trying to figure it out. And you're like, nope, got to choose it. So what do you think some of your, like, obviously being a single young parent even, what do you think some of your biggest challenges were that you had to overcome?
When it came to professionally, being at work and having the school call you and you having to run and pick up your kid and now you have two of them and it's flu season and you can't go to work for 3 or 4 days and you don't have the sick days and just all of the little things that come with life where if you have a job that gives you sick pay or, a partner who can stay home and share that with you, it makes life so much easier. And when you're doing it yourself, I got to enroll every boss that I had that, I was still this responsible, capable person that would come in and do the work. And yeah, you know what? I don't know. In the winter around, flu season, like you were picking up your kid like every other month and staying home with them for 3 days. And then the other one would get it. And then, so it was just, being able to do all that, still show up for work every day and make sure that, back then they'd fire you for that. Like, I don't know if you can get away with that now, but back then they would just fire you. And so it was like enrolling them all the time into, I'm still worth it.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously now with like modern technology, I feel like if you did have to work from home, like let's just say you had a 6 and 8 year old now, like you could feasibly still do your job. I mean, you do your job entirely now from home.
Yeah.
We were talking about that earlier. Like, so for those of you entrepreneurs or people who work remotely, like, we see you, we love you. We know it is a lonely journey.
It is lonely, and get up and get dressed every day.
Yes. Take a walk outside, say hello to the mailman. I know.
Make plans.
I definitely have learned my neighbors, and there's a park about maybe half a mile from my house. And I'll do the walk around. It's like it's a soccer park, but they have a track along the outside.
Oh,
So I go, and every morning it's like the same people. And then like some people, they only come on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And there's this lovely man who reminds me of Pink Sweats. Remember we went to his concert?
Yeah.
Big black guy. And he walks on the trail with an umbrella.
Oh, yeah.
And he says top of the morning to you. One of my favorite encounters. So again, not to go too far off track.
Me and Trader Joe's checkout people are on first name basis.
I love that. I'm glad. I was very glad for you when they built that Trader Joe's. It's very close to your house.
It is.
So, okay. You talked a little bit about that kind of acceptance of like, this is my career, but do you feel like there was like a turning point or this, specific moment that you realized you wanted to pursue what you're currently doing? And was that like related to your kids, or was it just something that you like really discovered for yourself?
I think I've had my career for a really long time, and I've always kind of done like, air quotes, office work. And along the way learned a lot, and it was always, I'm going to do this until I find out what I'm really supposed to do, or what I really want to do, or what my career is supposed to be. And then at some point, it was around the time I moved to LA, and I had my first executive assistant position at a tech company in Playa Vista. And I was like, I didn't realize that, there's a whole career here. And one, you don't have to have a college education to do it. And if you're smart and you're scrappy and you are organized and detail-oriented, or you can train yourself to do that, if you can show up as a leader and be confident and trustworthy, it's a really great career. And it's fun and it's lucrative.
Yeah, no, we talked about this a little bit during our pre-interview about working in the tech space and, not necessarily having, at the time that most of your friends were at college, like, you were a mom. Like, that was what you were doing. So you did have to really, like, build yourself up, both, in what you knew, in your skill set. I don't know what it is. Like, I was having a conversation with somebody about this recently where, like, you going to college somehow is like an automatic, like, oh, they're smart enough, or they know what they're doing. And if you don't have that, and believe me, like, some of my like smartest, most successful friends like did not go to college, which was really it was the baby boomer scam that they passed on to us because I feel like most of what I do now was not what I learned from college. I mean, like, I do feel like college made me like a smarter human, but it didn't make me more adept to actually exist in the world. So, I mean, I think your kids did that for you. And growing in my career, like, the person that's going to, looking at myself, I was always like, oh man, I'm the only one sitting in this room who hasn't gone to college. What do I have to say? What do I have to give? What do I have to contribute to this? Like, everyone, like, master's degrees and PhDs and engineers, and I'm like, but I fucking know the answer. Yeah.
And when I finally said, you know what, I'm going to say the answer, and then they all look at you and they're like, oh, she knows the answer. And it's just, my answers come from life experience, from like watching, sitting in the rooms. I sit in rooms with CEOs and with, chief technology officers and, all the chiefs of the office. And that's my college. That was my education.
Yeah. And there's power in that. I mean, between, like you said, being scrappy and growing up and learning how to it's funny because I was actually talking to a friend about this recently. There's a really good book called The Third Door. I don't know if you've read it, but I'll definitely send it over to you. And for the listeners, like I'll post it in the notes as well or in the show description below. But in The Third Door, essentially, he talks about, you know, the front door that we all know, like where you stand and you wait for your turn to enter, and the back or side door where like the VIPs get to come in. And then there's the third door. And the third door could literally be a door to the basement or a window that opens up or a door that you have to literally craft yourself.
Yeah.
And there's so much power, especially for people who kind of, you know, think out of the box and they have the ambition. There's so much power in knowing that the third door is always available and accessible if you choose. Like there's always another way in. Whatever you're trying to get into, there's always another way in. But no, it's such a powerful book. And I've recommended it. It's funny. I've recommended that book at least 3 times in the last like month. So there's something out there for everybody that's listening. The universe just wants me to like push this one out there. But it's so interesting though, because like exactly what you're saying, like I feel like a lot of even my own, you know, career and career ambitions have come from trying something, realizing, no, this isn't a good match, and then kind of falling into what I've done pretty much for like the last like 8 years. Mm-hmm. So it, you know, again, so much power. And looking at that, like, I do think that it is a testament to the listeners out there that are young moms that are, you know, struggling and sacrificing and maybe even thriving, that declare, decide, and keep pushing forward.
I just put my head, like I put my head down and I just did it.
Yeah.
Everything. And I found tools. There's so much out there to support you.
Yeah. Well, I do have a question about that in a second. But do you feel like so I'll just ask you that question right now. Did you build up a support network, or were there resources that you did really rely on? And I know when your kids were much younger, you still lived close to family. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, I think we talked about this in your pre-interview, that you didn't move to LA until your son was 18, your daughter was almost 15.
Yeah. And I mean, my network is my family. Like, I could not have done anything that I've done in my life without them. The little bit of road trip vacation I would ever get to go on, my mom or, you know, my ex-husband's mom was taking care of, well, they were like, oh yeah, we'll take care of the kids. You go and have your weekend, have fun. You know, again, the kids being sick, I had support, someone who would bring me groceries or, you know, do things like that. But then there's all this other support out there where if you look for it and dig for it and do the work, because it takes a lot of work. I bought my first home using HRDC, using a home loan that they had, bought my first home, sold it, bought my second home, and, you know, just made sure that I knew all of the things out there that could be a support to me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I want to own a home.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's also USDA. They have a great loan program for single moms or low income housing where they will do like a really low interest rate, or they'll support you in your down payment, like different things like that. I used all that shit. I was like, yeah, I want
like, I'll take it. Like, give me the support.
I'm who this is here for.
Yeah.
Right? And so and it was so funny because sometimes when I would go in there to do this, they're like, oh my gosh, like, no one comes in to do this. Like, they don't even know about it. And I'm like, yep, this is for me. I want it. I want to own a home.
Yeah.
And I did.
No, I mean, that's so powerful. Like that I love that it was your family. And I know that there are a lot of people that have struggled with that. Like I talked to somebody recently, a few episodes ago, you know her, Jessica, and we were talking about, you know, how grateful she is And I mean, on a daily basis, like she doesn't have like all the family support super close, but that, you know, mom and dad are like less than an hour away, and her husband's mom is close by and able to come like when they need her. And, you know, she had shared like hiring a nanny part-time and her husband working from work. And I look at this jigsaw puzzle of parenthood, and I give all parents out there like so much kudos, because you are constantly managing schedules and ailments that come out of nowhere, and like just everything that they like, their personalities.
And you know, parenthood, especially a single parent, is lonely. Like having a sister who'll come hang out with you on a Friday or a Saturday night and like have wine with you and watch a movie while everyone else that you know and your age is off at a party or out at a club or doing all this fun stuff, and just having that support of like, hey, you're not alone in this. And even, you know, when it comes to you not being able to go out or do something, I'm going to come hang out with you.
No, and I love that. Like, that's honestly been, and I was talking to my sister-in-law about that recently too. Like, that was a concern of mine and has continued even probably now why I'm 40 with no kids, is like, that was a concern where, you know, my mom lives 400 miles away. My dad is happily enjoying his 20s again, in his 60s. And he goes out so often. Even tonight, shout out Dad, who's out there somewhere in the world doing karaoke tonight. Like living his best life in his 60s. Like, it's, I mean, he got married really young, and he was 21 also, like you, got married really young, had kids in his 20s, and was pretty much like married with kids for like the last 40 years. Mm-hmm. So I get it. Like, more power to him. Have fun. I had my fun on the front end, and so now if I decide to like get married and have kids, like I've really got a lot of, hence the invention of this podcast and all of the chronicles of my nipples and everyone else's. So now that you are in your 30s and 40s, where have you found like your goals have changed, or you're really like what are you trying to achieve now in your life? Like, compared to, well, I guess through your 30s and 40s, how did your goals shift compared to like where you were in that survival mode early on?
Yeah. You know, it became more about what is the legacy I'm creating for my kids? What kind of, you know, what can I leave them? And not that I'm planning on taking off anytime soon, but, you know, what can I...
But you could. I mean, they're like in their late 20s.
Yeah, I could. And what's for me? Like, what fills me up, what makes me happy, what makes me jump out of bed in the morning, you know, looking at myself rather than, all right, I got to get this food on the table. This is the job that's going to get it done. I love my career. I will stay in it. And once I decided it was my career, I knew I was like, I'm retiring as this. So,
but we're going to put like lots of good energy that she retires early so she can do some of the other fun stuff that she wants to do. You
know, just coaching, mentoring other EAs too, especially who are coming up in the tech world. And love, like finding a relationship, you know, that, especially like in my 40s, you know, that's something that has come to the forefront. I put it on the back burner, and now I'm like, oh, okay, it's time to do this. I'm not in any hurry, but you know, all that career stuff will be there. Let's talk about what, you know, Roz wants in her personal life and travel. Like one of my goals is traveling. I have to leave the country one time a year, and you know, see the United States, do all the things that I dreamt about doing when I was 20 and was sitting at home with, you know, kids, you know, wanting to see the Eiffel Tower. You know, like I freaking saw the Eiffel Tower last year. I was like up in it, and I'm like,
is that when you went to Prague?
No, I went to Amsterdam, London, and then Paris.
No, you were in Lisbon.
I went to the year before.
That was for work though,
yeah,
right?
I did Portugal, and then I stayed But it's more about experiences for me. Like, what's my next experience? And, you know, finding like joy in everyday things. I'm not going to the grocery store looking at my checking account before I go in. So now all that stress and all of that took up space inside me can be set down. And now I can really look at like, ooh, what do I want? Not what do I need? And it is travel. It is love. It is, you know, building my friendships with the women in my life. And, you know, spending time with my family and, you know, really like spreading as much love as possible in this world that really needs it.
Oh yeah, for sure. No. And I love that. I mean, like, obviously you've had quite a journey over the last almost 30 years of really building out. And I love that because again, so many people live in that mode. Like, it's such an interesting survival mode where, you know, it was what was dealt to you, right? Like, you had kids and you got married really young, and maybe, I mean, again, this was in Montana. So in California, I don't know how often that's happening, or who knows, maybe 20 years ago it was happening a little bit more often. But it's such an interesting journey and dynamic. And I was actually having a conversation with a woman who was on one of our earlier episodes where I shared with her, I'm like, I don't do anything that I don't want to. And I'm like, there's so much power in that. Yeah. And I said, this is where, and I think I'm a very loving person. And then, you know, like, there was a moment maybe a couple years ago where I was like, I think we actually was at your birthday. We were having dinner for your birthday a few years ago. And we were talking about a friend of yours who like wanted to have a kid. And I said, I guess I'd be open to having a kid. And Rosalind has a whole plan for me, like, when I decide that I actually want one, especially if I'm willing to do it in single motherhood. But, you know, sometimes you just, like you said, you just got to go out there and get it. Like, and that's the thing is, like, everything I've ever wanted, if I genuinely wanted it, I did go out and get it. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I don't have like any reluctance of like, do I want babies? But because again, everything I do, I choose. Yeah. So it would have to be like, come from that space of like, this is what I choose.
I'm watching a lot of friends who are my age, maybe a little younger, who are single women, beautiful, successful, freaking knocking it out of the freaking park. And they're ready for children, and there's a time crunch that I have no idea what that feels like. Yeah. I have no idea what it feels like to want.
No, you were like kid. Young fertile soil, and that was it. Kids popped out there. They were.
When they talk about it, I'm like, I know, like, my heart feels it, but my like womb does not feel it. I'm like, I know I know there's something you're feeling there, and my heart feels for you, but I have no idea what that feels like.
Well, there's a woman that we both know who, when we did the all women's workshop, had expressed something about wanting to have children, and I was really trying to get her on an episode before she gave birth, but she struggled with, like, you know, late 30-something, 40-something infertility. And, you know, like, now to see that she's pregnant and she's about to have a baby, like, she's due in December. And again, though, like, it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know. This is my baby, right? The creation of this. And that's what's so powerful is now I see, like, there are a lot of lessons from, like, my early years that have brought me here. And, you know, like I said, we've known each other a long time, and we met in a personal development workshop, and I was in a very tumultuous space, but I was doing well financially then, and it just didn't fit though. And I've had that a few times where, like, I do have these like moments of like financial success, and it just never like really like hit in my heart of like, this is what I'm supposed to do. And so now, like, again, mine is lessons from life, but I would ask you, like, were there lessons from motherhood that did support you in knowing that like the career path that you chose was right?
Well, that came a little bit later. First, I had amazing. I worked for amazing companies and worked, as an executive assistant, you work very closely usually with one person, and you create a relationship with that person. And I have had the privilege of having amazing teachers, amazing bosses, amazing people and they wanted to see me succeed. And what I brought from being a single parent into where I am is lead the way.
Yeah.
Like, I lead the way. I know what's going on. I have all the details. I have all the organization. I don't take no for an answer. And, sometimes, and getting across what I need to get done, or having people do things they don't necessarily want to do, by enrolling them into it.
Yeah.
Instead of, forcing them into it, because you spend your whole, raising your kids, you spend that whole time enrolling your kids into doing what you want them to do.
Yeah. So that they're not screaming.
If you're pounding on them, they're like, my son had a look on his face where he would just glaze over his eyes, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you just left your body and you're not here and you're not listening to me. And I would be like, oh my gosh, I just want to like shake you and bring you back. And it's so funny because we've talked about it now that he's an adult, and he's like, oh yeah. He's like, I would totally do that. And he's like, I wasn't even listening.
Just zoned out.
And it was a glassy look over his face. But it was enrolling your kids into getting them to do what you needed them to do. It was being the leader of your family.
Yeah.
Like, I was the mama duck. I was like, walking down
we're walking, let's go.
And we're walking, and let's go, and we're doing it my way. And
Yeah.
as a single parent, you also get the privilege of doing it your way.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you had shared this, though, that your partner had other partners during, or your ex-partner, your co-parent had other partners while your children were growing up. And even that we talked about, like the relationships and, making sure that like you were putting a lot, like you were sacrificing a lot. You were putting a lot to the side, your own personal feelings or.
Oh, and I had feels. I had the feels.
Your conversations of like, hey, and again, to single mothers whose, fathers of their children may potentially be dating, like, it's very important. Like, we talked about this. Like, I grew up in a household where that was not, on the front burner. And my mom and my stepmom had a horrible relationship to the point that, like, to her dying day, I know, like, my stepmom will never, like, have any forgiveness or trust towards my mom. And I know a big part of that. And just in recent times have I brought that to my dad's attention, where I was like, that was your responsibility. Like, you were adults. Yes. You were in charge. And here I was, 10, 11, 12, trying to navigate their tumultuous relationship to the point that, like, I did have to choose sides. At 11 years old, I did choose to stay with dad and stepmom and sever a relationship with my mom.
Yeah, I grew up in a household where I had a stepfather, and we didn't even acknowledge that I had a dad. And that really shaped how I saw co-parenting with their dad, my kid's dad. And it was never, I was not perfect. I have called him and apologized for many, many different things that you're fiery. I'd get fiery and we would definitely go at it. But at the core, remembering, okay, I actually loved this person once. Mm-hmm. For me, I will love him forever. Yeah. I met him in 3rd grade. Like, oh, wow. we grew up together. We knew each other in high school, and I really care for him as a person. We're definitely not meant to be together, but and when he was in a relationship where it was introducing them to the kids, or they had moved in, I really took it upon myself. I'm like, that I'm the one who gets to create this relationship.
Yeah.
And as the mom, you really do have that power. Like, I'm going to create the kind of relationship that this woman is going to have with my children.
Yeah.
I'm going to create the kind of relationship that she's going to have with me. And, you know, part of what I'm creating too is, am I creating a loving relationship for them to have, for him and her to have?
Yeah. You don't want to be the source of conflict.
No. And, you know, it was, many of them, we went out and had wine. We went out and talked. We went out and did things together. You know, as the kids got older, that got a little bit harder because they formed their own opinions.
Yeah.
And so when, you know, when he married the wife that he has now, one married her when the kids were just going into their teenage years. And I was like,
so much fun.
I was like, are you sure you want to do this? Like, it was, I could just see it all playing out. And there was, like, you know, a tumultuous time. There was some, you know, loss in their family. There was a lot going on. And then they got this new stepmom. And it took a minute. And, you know, I didn't have a real strong relationship with her like I had with some of the others. And when I say others, there was like 3 or 4 or so. But it was through my kids. I was like, you know, I'm not going to say that you need to give her a chance to call her mom to listen to you, do all those things. I'm not going to force that on you. But what I want to do is just make you aware of the hornet's nest that she stepped into.
Yeah.
You guys are in, you know, the hardest years of your life. And now she's going into the hardest years of her life because of you.
Well, and was she like a comparable age, or was she younger?
No, she was I think she's a couple years younger than me.
But that would still be a lot to navigate.
But had not had a real serious...
Did she have children?
No. And had not been married before. And, you know, we'd been through it already. We'd been through some shit. And so I think now it's much better.
Yeah.
The kids are older. They see what life really is like and have some patience. And
now they're the age that you guys were when you were navigating that.
Yeah. Oh, and it's
almost
like
just about.
I like look at, sometimes I'm like, you know, Maddie will do something and it'd be like something, you know,
silly,
kind of dumb or silly, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I was like, I was literally taking care of like 2 kids and running a household, and like it was something silly, but.
No, and we've had this conversation. I mean, obviously, like the time that I've known you, like I've watched you and your daughter and the relationship there. Like, it's not even, I mean, modern world one, but like where we live now and how we live, and then obviously like living here in LA, like it's not even the same. Like, you guys are not playing the same sport at all.
No,
like,
we are not playing the same sport.
You were playing like in the like gladiators ring with like wild animals flying at you, and she's playing golf.
You want to know what?
Or
yeah, and here's the thing. Like I that was my plan. I wanted my kids I wanted to go through that so that they could have that, so she could, you know, not be in the gladiator ring at 20 years old and fighting for her life and fighting for her kids' lives. I wanted that for them, you know.
No, and that's a huge accomplishment, like for you and yourself and like what you've created. The fact that like you can maintain a household where your daughter doesn't have the same significant expenses that another 20-something would have right now in LA. Like, she does have you, and that is a blessing that you can extend to her. Mm-hmm. You know, if you were not in a financially like sound space, like you could just kick her to the curb and say, hey, you know what? Like, you're 25 almost, right? Yeah. 24. Like, see you later, honey. Like, time. Sorry, baby duck. Yeah. Like, leave.
LA's hard. You know, most of her friends still live at home. LA is really a tough place to get on your own.
Or you have to have like 10 roommates.
10 roommates, yeah. And, you know, to be honest, there's a point where you become your kid's friend. Like, growing up, I was not their friend.
Yeah.
And when they became the age where they could be my friend, I'm like, you guys are fucking cool. I want to hang out with you. Like,
she's like, man, I did a great job. Like,
you're funny. We have a great time together, you know.
Well, and then you have the privilege of like knowing their whole history.
Yeah.
Like that would be, you know, you see the jokes on like Instagram, like in the reels where they're like, this is my broke best friend. Like, and it's true. And I mean, I definitely see where like that was something that I missed growing up. When you're sharing this story right now about your former husband's current wife, when my dad and stepmom, like they had dated when I was much younger. I first met her when I was like 4 or 5 years old, 4 or 5. And we didn't move in together with her. We did a little bit, I feel like when I was like maybe 5 or 6, but it didn't last long. It was like less than a year. And then they broke up and then they got back together and then we moved in with her when I was 10. So like she was always there, but she wasn't really like treated as a parent. She was just this woman in my dad's life. So, and I had been the woman in my dad's life because I was parentified so young, having single parents. And that's why I always like tell you, like, kudos to you. And again, my dad did the best he could, but it did the difference in the dynamic of like being raised by a single dad versus a single mom. Like I took on so much responsibility and I became, you know, parentified and an adult at like 8 years old, 7 years old. Like I can remember some of the crazy, like I still to this day blow my dad away with the level of details that I remember for my entire life. Mm-hmm. Like I could go somewhere once, like right now in this moment, I could tell you where Rosalind keeps the forks and the knives in her kitchen. It's been a few months since I've been to her house, but like I know all of her house. I know all of my house. There are many other humans that like and I don't know, again, that maybe that's my survival mode of like memorizing details and knowing all the facts and having all the information. But as a kid, like that was essential.
Yeah.
And I mean,
so it really it's likely a trauma response.
It definitely definitely
remember all that stuff. And it is true. I believe that when it is a single dad, and I've noticed this when I've had other friends raised by single dads, that they are parentified very young. I was definitely parentified young. I was taking care of my siblings at a very young age. And while, you know, I'm sure I have trauma that goes along with that, I knew from day one, I'm like, my kids will not do, like, that will not happen.
Yeah.
They will get to be kids for, you know,
as long as
possible, as long as they choose. They won't get to be irresponsible, but they will not have to parent themselves.
Yeah. Or, I mean, even to a point where, like, I legitimately remember parenting my parents. Like, even beyond parenting myself, like, being a soundboard for my parents, and, you know, again, like, in single parenthood, like, I do not shame anybody. I mean, if that's where you are, and like, I know you're doing the absolute best you can, but it's just my goal here, and like even this conversation with you, is like bringing awareness to all of it. Like awareness to whatever you want in your life you can create. There's certain things, you know, certain skill sets and tools you're going to have to pick up along the way, but know that like no matter what you do, your kids are going to still have some form of trauma. Like,
totally.
That's inevitable.
Oh, yeah.
That's inevitable because, you know, Rosalind has a great relationship with their kids, but they definitely have their share as well.
Yeah. Bring them on a podcast and see what they say.
We'll have part 2 of this episode will be with Maddie, her 24-year-old. And I mean, again, like Rosalind and I are really close and I've spent time in her house and I know her daughter. So even in that, like I've had some conversations with Maddie, like, hey, you know what? Like she's doing the best she can. You're doing the best you can. Like, and that's the bottom line of like, and I think it's so funny because again, like you're a younger mom. Mm-hmm. So even the age gap between you and your daughter is a lot less than other moms and daughters.
Totally.
And like, I love that you said, like, you were growing up with her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think about, like, at 20, like, oh my God, like, I was driving a car that I had bought for, like, $4,000, and I was working at Subway, and
You know what? I was close to that.
Dating dumb boys.
Had a kid to do all that with. But
yeah, and so did I to a certain extent, because my dad had kids when I was almost 15. So I was dragging a kid along. Shout out to Joe. And maybe that was like where I feel like a part of me has already been a parent.
yeah.
And like he just finished with college, and he's like now moving into his career. But there are moments where he's like, well, I was so blessed, I had mom and dad and you and my brother that were like so much older. I mean, I can remember being like 19 or 20 going to like his preschool graduation. So again, essentially like our kids are almost the same age.
I will say too, shout out to my kids. They were easy.
Yeah.
Even at babies, I wasn't up all night with colic. And if you have kids when you're 20, you can not sleep for 3 nights in a row and still rally.
Yeah, that's true.
My sister had a daughter young and then had a son when she was older, and we just looked at each other when she had her son. We're like, oh my God, I'm so tired. Like, this is so hard. I'm so tired.
Well, how old is he now, though? He's like 8?
He's older now. So
okay.
He's 12.
Okay. Because I also remember meeting him and that sister. And I think it's when she came into town to do the workshop, and you had to go, like, you got to be on full auntie duty. And I remember after it, you said, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. Yeah. And that was probably like 5 years ago, like 6 years ago, maybe. Like 5 years ago.
A crying baby at 20, man, I could just like, woohoo, let's go.
Here's a snack. Let's go.
Let's go.
And again, that's the like, the wisdom of like, I didn't know this was a great thing I was doing.
Yeah.
But now, like, looking at like, how did that, like being a young mother, really shape now how you are as a leader, or how you show up at work, or how you show up even in your relationships with people?
Mm-hmm. I think as far as being a leader, that came with time. It came with it came with like being the advocate and the person who's going to speak for your children. Mm. And if you need them to get something, if you need to protect them, it rises up in you and you have no choice but to use it, harness it. And I took that into work.
Yeah. Well, now I'd imagine like you have this whole like arsenal of tools and skills. Totally. And the I guess the awareness when someone's eyes do glaze over. You can hey.
Oh, I can
pay attention.
Hey. I can read a room like nobody's business. Like,
well, and then especially working in tech, like I know I briefly worked in tech, and there was like the cool kids that were, on one half, they were usually like the marketing kids or maybe like the sales jocks and
all the extroverts.
And it was funny. The office was split. It was so funny. Yeah. Like, I mean, we had communal style tables, very tech, very like Silicon Beach, and Silicon Valley. But like it was like all the sales guys were together, and then the designers were in one room, and marketing was in another room, and then like the kind of higher up, I guess like customer relationship people were in a different room. Like those were like the supervisors. They were like really in charge of the accounts. But like even when the CEO would come in, he would sit at one of the communal tables, like right on the middle point. So I would watch him, right? Like, where's he sitting? Because that's where I want to sit. Like, I want to see what he's up to. And I made it a point to go around and like talk to the engineers and meet everybody and know everybody, because my mentor told me, he's like, relationships are what matter. 100%. And we were talking about that recently. So those mothers that are out there that are navigating their careers right now, early in their careers, meet people, network, know people. We were talking about going on LinkedIn, and like when, certain people that I've worked with in the past, like post things, I'm quick to like jump on and post and be like, 100%. Hey, congratulations on the new job, or wow, you started a new company. So great. But it's so funny because that has become a skill set through my 20s and 30s that I've built, of being able to read the room, talk to people from all walks of life, and really, and Rosalind can attest to this, my growth in this, shut up and listen. Like, that's been a big one.
And but also speak up when you have the answer and and you have the solution. Don't sit with it. Really, stand up and use your voice.
Yeah. But it's choosing those moments, right? Because there could be some powerful insight that you bring, but if you're always, what's the word, jabbering or chattering or one of those. No one's listening to you.
That comes with the emotional intelligence piece. Yeah. Once you get that and you're working on that, then you can read the room. You know when to speak up. Yeah. And, people will trust you then. And networking is, I believe, networking in outside your organization. Network within your company. You have no idea what this person is working on that you might want to be a part of, or that someone breaking off and starting their own company, or someone leaving the company and going somewhere else, a place you've really wanted to work, and they get you in the door. Yeah. My last couple, roles that I've had came because I networked with someone inside the company that wasn't even in my organization. I went outside of it and get to know as many people as possible. Like, that's key.
Yeah. No, and I think it's really powerful that you have discovered that. And obviously, that motherhood and having that knowledge within yourself has really been a part of what, I could only assume, part of what you've created now in your career.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, we're coming close to the end here. So I'm curious, what advice would you give young moms that are, that maybe feel like they have to choose between career or family or motherhood?
It might feel like a choice, but they can go hand in hand. And it's about being creative. It's about your network and your support system. And, some people, when they think of support system, they're like, oh, my mom or my dad or my sisters or my auntie. But there's so much out there if you go looking for it. Find those resources that can support you in caring for your kids, or can support you in getting your foot in that door at a company. It's all about, putting yourself out there, showing what you can do, and not taking no for an answer.
Yeah. No, that's so powerful. And again, as you're saying this, I'm like, I've got a list, I've got a network. Slide in the DMs, reach out to me. I'll connect you with Rosalind if you're an aspiring, executive assistant, or you want to navigate the tech world. I've got people now in every arena. And if you want to buy a house, definitely reach out to me. I've got tons of real estate agent friends at this point. People, networks allow this, podcast, this platform to be a resource for you. We're here. You have access as a listener to all of my guests, and, we'll connect you and network you and help you build out that system and really, using your tools.
I would love to help people do that.
Yeah. So is there a message you'd like to share with other women who may be on a similar journey of balancing motherhood and career?
Your career is your career. And ambition and all of that is important. Don't miss out on the little things with your kids. It really is a short amount of time. It was a short amount of time, actually, that I did struggle. And yes, it was very hard, but the amount of creativity I got to use, playing with my kids, and, we would have free weekends. I call them free weekends. Everything we did had to be free. And so we'd go around and we'd find all the free things you could do. There's always something at the library. There's always a concert somewhere. There's always, in LA, there's something every,
Oh, yeah.
You could do anything. So have free weekends. Find those things that you can do with them and enjoy every moment. It goes by so fast. And one thing I will say I did, and I didn't realize I was doing it until a little bit later. I enjoyed every hard moment, the terrible twos. I freaking enjoy. I'd just sit back and be like, "This is freaking so funny." Like, junior high and high school, and maybe that was because I was so close to it in age. I was like, "Oh yeah, that's right on time. That's when that happened." And my daughter quit talking to me in 8th grade for like I felt like months, but I know it wasn't that long. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I did that too." So yeah, we're right on time with that. And just sit back and kind of be in it, but also watch it from 10,000 feet. Because if you're always in it and it's always like you're hitting your head against the wall or everything's hard, you'll miss the beautiful moments and seeing it from the perspective of, oh, I get this. This is a moment. It goes by in an instant.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your insight and your wisdom. And again, we'll share some socials you can connect with Rosalind on LinkedIn. And
yeah, and I'll send you a couple links of resources that I've used, and I know that they're federal resources, so I know that they will have them here that help me buy my house and help me do a lot of other things.
Yeah.
But the house was the biggest.
Yeah, no, there's so much power in that.
There's so much power in becoming a homeowner.
Yeah. Now you're not paying somebody else's mortgage. Yeah. And again, to close out this episode, but stay tuned. We will jump right into Women Demystified, the part of our show where men get to send in their questions. So stay tuned. So welcome back to our section of our episode called Women Demystified, where men can submit their questions to us and I present them to my guests who get to play along. So for all of you men out there, feel free to slide into the DMs, drop your questions, and we are the Nipple Chronicles at the Nipple Chronicles on Instagram or nipplecchronicles.com and reach out and send in your questions. These are the questions you've always wanted to ask women, but you're afraid or society has told you not to ask. So question number 1, and this, I've modified the question slightly because the man's question. How do you navigate modern dating culture, including dating apps, and has technology influenced your approach?
I think technology's influenced everyone's approach to dating. And it's been a challenge. I think I was joking with you about this earlier where you can swipe in Bozeman, Montana and get to the end. There's an end where they're like, no more matches for you.
No more available
and then you have to wait like a couple hours and then it would reload. And here it's
infinite.
Yes. And that also causes another issue.
Oh yeah.
And it's the same with everyone. Like just what influenced my dating was I decided after a failed relationship where I had, melded my family together with another human and it didn't work. And I said, okay, you know what? I did this and I'm not going to do it again because my kids already had kind of a lot of moms and I didn't want them to have the same kind of revolving door.
Daddy door.
The same daddy door. And so I made a choice. Mm-hmm. I still have fun. Yeah. There was still time for me to have a great time.
You dated pre-technology, so nothing. And you had a little bit. Maybe not in Bozeman, Montana. You had a little anonymity.
Yeah. And then, moving here, I feel like there was an arc to my my electronic dating experience where I was like, started off, it was really cool. You were meeting a lot of people, and then you reach the top, and you're like, oh, I've gone on some really cool dates. And then you're like, oh, shit, there's the same dude on every single dating site. I'm kind of attracting the same person. Mm-hmm. Then I realized, okay, I get to remove myself from this situation and find out what's going on with me that I keep attracting this person. And so I've spent, a lot of time doing that. And
$2,000. $10,000
we'll go with
plus.
that. We'll go with that. And so I'm actually like at a point where I've opened the door to dating from a totally different perspective.
Mm-hmm. We were talking about this earlier too, with just boundaries that we learn now as we're getting older, and we've got, are we 8 years apart? Somewhere in there. It just the difference in dating now and creating boundaries. And we were joking about this with the online dating where, funny story, when we were doing our pre-interview, we were definitely a little distracted. We typed into ChatGPT about our dream man, and we were laughing because the description of our dream man was almost identical. So that's probably part of why we're like good friends.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting because I didn't share this with you, but so I have a Hinge profile. I am dating somebody now, but I did get a message recently, like maybe, I don't know, a couple days ago. And it was a guy who I dated, we'll use that term loosely, had fun with maybe like 5 years ago. And he sent me a message, meaning like I had probably matched with him or said yes to him like a while back. I do have a type, but he finally like matched with me and then sent a message that was like, do you remember me? And my brain was like, kind of. And then when he started writing like really like weird messages, I was like, red alert, red alert, red alert. Like, yes, I remember you. And then I replied back like, yeah. And he's like, well, where do you live now? And I'm like, okay. I was like, I told you where I said north of LA. Like, I live in the northern region of LA County. And he blocked me. And I started cracking up. First, why my brain was like, why am I even entertaining this conversation? Like, I'm dating somebody who's an amazing human and I'm having such a fun time getting to know. But it was such a funny, like, this is the world we live in, you know? And we talked about the difference of having like technological love affairs, like where like you can date them and if you choose to move on, you never have to see this human again.
Yeah.
Versus like we talked about dating at work. I mean, again, she works remote and so do I. And I work for a small organization. She works for a big organization. I do a lot of work for myself. I don't have access to a workplace dating pool.
Yeah.
But I also look at it where it might actually be a gift because then you would still have to see them if things didn't work out.
Yeah. It's so clarifying. Workplace organization or workplace dating, it better be a big company. And yes, it's still, but we used to have school.
Yeah.
Where your dating pool came from.
Yeah.
And then college.
Yeah.
And then, your early on jobs where you would, and now we have our friends who can, set us up or whatever, but there's a big gap of like where we're meeting people.
Yeah.
And online, it sounds like a really good idea.
In theory.
But it's so superficial. And I think that and for me you get discouraged with that superficialness and then you stop. And you're like, I'm not doing this anymore. But I do think that again, be creative with it.
Well, we were talking about this that so the guy who I was dating before or like casually dating, I had gone on a couple dates with before the guy who I'm dating now, he had a very specific profile. And I think that might be a tip for people that are online dating. Like, be really clear what you want. Like, his profile specifically said that he was dating only for serious intention and like marriage.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so many layers to that, but, he was really specific. And I actually was thinking about that before I met the person who I'm seeing now, who I met out in the world, just standing in line somewhere. But, and again, that's another thing, like be open to that because it's there.
Smile
everywhere.
At people, make eye contact with them, chit chat.
Yeah.
Like, it's all out there.
And we're all like how you're saying, like it's lonely and we're separated and everyone is. Like everyone is having those moments where they're like, oh my God, I'm all alone. And I mean, we met again through a leadership organization, a personal development organization, and we both have declared like we will not date within that space. But that doesn't mean that like we can't create a network of a network. Like, totally. Like you still use that as a part of like, maybe I'm not dating those specific individuals, but who knows? Maybe they like, we're all each other's network. So don't be shy. Like, yes, use technology, but also like know that there is a bigger world.
Tell people you're single and you're open and have, hey, like I'm not going to work and saying, hey, do you know anybody that's single? But everybody knows I'm single.
And ready to date.
And that I will date.
Yeah.
And so, bring it on.
And she has a criteria, which is so powerful. Like if you're not, and especially for our listeners that are like 30s and above, 35 and above, if your intention is for long-term dating, do not ask for permission. Like create your own criteria, whatever that looks like. And it may look different. The criteria that Rosalind has may look different than the criteria I have. Like we're in two very different places in life.
They should be different.
Yeah. And like, it doesn't matter. Like, choose what you choose and go forward.
And go into it. And again, like, if it's not working, pivot. Like, don't. I spent a lot of, dating when I was younger. I had a very interesting, experiences dating as a single parent because there was no. They knew from the get-go, this is it. Whether it's, once every other weekend that we get to hang out or whatever that is, I was always very clear that you are not going to integrate into my life, which served the purpose, but also didn't serve me in, learning how to create connection with people. And going through the work that I've done and dating since then, make the decision, and if it's not right, pivot. Don't hang on to it because you're lonely. Because the next person could be just standing there, waiting with open arms, and your person, and you're fiddling around with this guy because
Mr. Not Right,
Mr. Red Flag, Mr. like. You're amazing, but there's just something that's not feeling, like something's not right.
Yeah.
And we're not a connection, but I'm going to make a connection because I want to be in a relationship.
Yeah. Well, and here's another one that, so I made a book recommendation earlier to Rosalind, and here's one that she actually gave me a few years ago. It's called Calling on the One.
Love that.
And I never shared this with you, but there's an exercise in there like about cord cutting. And I did it in February. Went to visit a friend. So I had read the book years ago when you first suggested it, and then I actually downloaded the Audible version, which doesn't work quite as well because if you read it first and go through the exercises, that's one thing. But I listened to it as kind of a follow up. And when I went to do the cord cutting, I was visiting a friend who lives in Joshua Tree.
So cord cutting basically is...
Oh, yeah. Elaborate.
Is not, cutting off your situationships, cutting off your, guy that you call every, once a month. It's cutting off anybody that's hanging on to you that's not your person.
Yeah.
And going in like, I'm free, I'm open, I'm here, and that's done.
Yeah.
Cut the cord, doors closed.
Doors closed. And it was funny because when Rosalind and I were reading this book together years ago, I wasn't ready for that. Like, I definitely admit that. Like, at 37, somewhere in there, I wasn't ready. I, like, still had all these attachments and, like, different conversations and different relationships. And I realized, like, if one of those was going to work, it would have already worked. And it was coming into this year where I did have a friend who Rosalind knows that I'd been friends with now for, like, 8 years. And I realized even though nothing had ever happened between us, I still had a cord. And by the way, he was someone I met online. So, like, definitely be present to that. Like, even if you are, like she said, like, attracting the same person, or you're finding that you're cycling through from app to app and you're matching with the same people.
It's feedback.
It is. And, you know, be open. The encouragement here and the invitation is for you to, like, go navigate and have a different approach, and
remembering this is about you.
Yeah.
It's not about other people. It's not about your family. This is about you, and being truthful and honest about what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and knowing that and speaking it and having boundaries with it.
Yeah.
And you're going down the road with somebody and it's going great, and you're like, oh, wait, no, this isn't right.
Yeah.
Pivot.
Make the left. Make the right.
Make the left. Make the right. Do it, because, you know, if you're hanging on to that next person isn't there.
Yeah. And you can fast forward 4 years, like myself.
That happens.
I was dating someone in 2019, not too long after we had met, and he's been around, and I do adore him as a human, but there was a big cord that had to be cut there. And again, like, I realized, we talked about this too, like, if the person that you're attracting, the person you're dating, is bringing more drama into your life, that's probably a big sign of, like, even if the drama isn't directly impacting you, but they have their own drama that they're dragging around, like, that could be a part of it.
Yeah.
And again, sending you love, you know who you are.
And when you break up with somebody, break up with them.
Yeah.
If you're, again, it goes back to that cord cutting. If you're hanging on and, you know, having that fun every other weekend, or when you're lonely.
Yeah.
It definitely impacts the energy that you're putting out there in the world.
Oh, yeah. That was a big one. But it was, you know, it took probably, I don't know, 4 months of, like, no contact.
Yeah.
No people, no anything. I've
needed years.
But I made great friendships in that time. And, like, I was able energetically to open up space for other people. Mm-hmm. So, again, closing out this question, technology
we could go on forever.
We really could, but technology has influenced both of our, you know, approaches to dating, but also know, like, the invitation, again, like I said, is, like, figure out what you want and look everywhere. Like, leave no stone unturned.
Totally.
Yeah. So, question number 2. How has your perspective on marriage shifted over the years? Do you feel like you view it differently now in your 40s than you did in your 20s?
Yeah, definitely. Like, you know, now at 20, commitment, lifelong commitment, didn't even register what it actually was.
Yeah.
And, you know, now I know what commitment is. I've made a commitment to many things in my life, and I know what it actually means, and what it means to be together and say, I'm doing this. And so my perspective is all built around commitment and what that truly is, because I had no idea.
Yeah.
I was like, I was walking down the aisle and I was like, oh, I wonder how, you know, oh my gosh, what am I going to do next week?
You know? How will these pictures come out? Like,
yeah. And now I'm like, you know, when I'm ready for that with the person, I know what that means.
Yeah. Well, and we talked a little bit in the pre-interview about the difference now in your life of, like, when you were in your 20s, like, needing a husband versus, like, now look how many years you've lived on your own, raise your children, grow your career. Like, do you need a husband anymore?
Does any woman need a husband anymore?
Yeah, we were talking about this. 6-figure salaries and,
I think that's the you're talking about this podcast being, your baby. And that's the beauty of what women get to create now. My mom didn't have that opportunity. She was going to be a mom no matter what, and she was going to get married at a young age, and she was going to have children, and big Catholic family.
Yeah.
And I fell into it.
Yeah.
And now, because of how women have, cut all the binds that tied them and can do anything that they want to do. Kids aren't the end goal anymore.
Yeah. Or husbands.
But
you do want one.
I do want. Oh, totally. I definitely do. And I know what it will mean to have one. But we don't need it anymore.
Yeah. No, there's so much power. And I remember even a few years ago, like, wanting someone and, like, really seeing the difference between, like, wanting a partner and needing a partner. Like, when my mom got married, that was her, like, escape from her family and her household. Like, she was like, no, I needed 100%. To get married.
Yeah.
Like, that was how she got out. Whereas, like, I was like, what? Like, I'm going to college. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this.
I think, women have created a space for them to be, equal and be able to make these choices. And it is about partnership. It is about love. It is about growth. And you can only grow truly in relationship with somebody. I can do all this work. I can do all of that. Therapy, workshops, all of it. And I only see if the work is working when I get into a relationship with somebody.
Oh yeah. And you've had a couple in the time we've known each other.
Oh yeah. And I learned so much about myself, about men, about what I want. And it is about partnership, and we do need that.
Yeah.
In this world too. Like, love creates love.
Oh, yeah. No, I definitely am an advocate of love and unconditional love at that. And even when people, again, like we said, we've navigated and we've learned. And even when people make me crazy, specifically men, now I know, like, boundary. Like, I love you unconditionally, but I also know that I hate you in this moment. Mm-hmm. And there's so much power in that. And even, like, my friends who have been married for a long time, like, we talk about that. Like, it's all a choice. So with that, choose love.
Definitely choose love.
Yeah.
That's the whole reason we're here in this embodiment.
Oh, in this microcosm of life. Yeah. So, well, again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's been so beautiful.
Yay,
I was so excited. So stay tuned for the next episode of the Nipple Chronicles. Be sure to subscribe and catch us on the next one. Bye-bye. Before we wrap up today's episode, a big shout out to our wonderful sponsors, the Village Workspaces. Whether you're an entrepreneur, freelance, or creative soul, the Village Workspaces are the perfect environment to foster creativity and productivity. With state-of-the-art facilities and a community that thrives on collaboration, it's more than just a workplace. It's a place where ideas grow and connections are made. Visit the Village Workspaces today to see why it's an ideal spot for anyone to push the boundaries of what's possible. And remember, when you mention the Nipple Chronicles, you'll receive a special offer on your first visit. Make your next big move at the Village Workspaces, where your potential meets opportunity.